Failure is the condiment that gives success its flavor. He who has a why to live can overcome any how. Learn like you'll live forever. Live like you'll die tomorrow. What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the shop. I'm Daniel with Bearded Viking Woodworks. My channel is all about spreading that inspiration us woodworkers often need. I scour online to find the most popular, most profitable, and the most customizable woodworking projects I can find to bring back and share with you guys and put our own spin on them. And show you why you should consider building these. This is episode 31 of Stuck on Sawdust, and we're starting this episode off with this badass jewelry stand. This thing is super popular right now online, and I've seen them selling quick, and they're online as a best-selling item. This particular one is 18 inches in length at the bottom, and the riser sits at 18 inches tall. And then they did their little whoop-de-woos here. But we're going to simplify it just a bit and put our own little touch to it. The riser is 3.5 inches in width and 3/4 inches thick. So you know what time it is. Meet me at the table saw. Over here at the table saw, I've got this big old chunk of hickory and this wonderful piece of Claro walnut. And it's got some cool figure in it. So I'm going to use this walnut piece for the base, and this piece of hickory is going to be cut down to fit as the riser. I've got some big plans for this jewelry stand. But first, I need to get my rough sawn lumber milled down at the joiner and the planer. If you don't have a joiner or a planer, don't worry, there's plenty of videos online on how you can get your stock S4S without a planer or a joiner. Or you can just purchase your stock S4S, which is surface 4 sides. Let's go ahead and get this stuff cleaned up at our joiner and planer, and I'll meet you back here at our table saw. Hey, think fast. Yes! Now that our material has been joined and planed, we're going to go ahead and get it cut to the dimensions we want. I'm going to cut my hickory at 16 inches, and I'm going to rip it at 1.25 inches. And our width, we're going to start at 3 inches. For our walnut base, we're going to cut it at 16 inches as well. The overall width I have right now is 7 inches. I'm going to leave it at 7 inches and cut it down at 16 inches. And our thickness is at 7/8. So let's head to the miter box and get our stock cut down. Our next move is going to be ripping our backer at 1.25 inches, and we're going to leave it at 3 inches wide for now. So we'll just go ahead now, set our fence to 1.25 inches, and get this ripped down. I'm probably going to wind up taking this in a couple passes just because it's so thick. So let's rock and roll. So for our walnut base, I'm going to be cutting 2 alcoves. One is going to start from here and go to about 1 inch in from the edge. And it's going to be about this wide here, probably about 4 inches wide or so. And then I'm going to cut one directly opposite of that over here. And the way I'm going to be doing this is I'm going to set up a jig on my table saw that's going to allow me to run my piece over my blade little by little to make that little alcove for earrings or change or any kind of spare jewelry someone may have. But first, I'm going to get the center marked out where our riser is going to sit and attach to. And I'm probably going to bring that in to about the center of the board here. And then I'm going to kick it up at an angle, not a big angle, just a slight angle. And then we'll get this dadoed in to a notch. That way I can glue it in. And then we'll most likely add a couple of fasteners through the back just to give it that extra stability. So let's get this thing laid out. So we know we cut our length at 16. So center is going to be at 8 inches. So we'll mark out for 8 inches. Grab our speed square and just square that line on down. And we know that that's going to be center. So my stock is 16 inches in length, 3 inches in width, and 1 1/4 inches thick, which is perfect for this jewelry stand. So after much deliberation, I think I have it laid out exactly where I want it. So we're going to finish this center mark. That way we can make sure we're lined up where we need to be. We'll mark center of our riser, which is going to be 5/8 on the back here. And then we'll mark 5/8 on the front as well. That way we can line these 2 marks up with our center mark on our walnut backer. I'm going to make a little mark right where I want it to stop. And then line this thing up with all the marks. And then I'll mark the back where the back stops. Then I'll take my square and butt the riser. Move the riser out of the way and take my knife and make a mark from the front mark to the back mark. And then I'll place my riser back on to my square and then do the same thing on the opposite side. And we can darken these lines up if we need to. Now I'm going to take my marking wheel and set it right on this back mark that I made. This way I can get a nice knife line in there. Because what I'm going to be doing is routing out about 3/8 inch deep into this little square where my riser will sit. That way I can get some really good glue action going on. Next we'll go from the front side to our front mark and do the same thing with our marking wheel. Give ourselves a nice line to lay our chisel in. Nice. Once we get that done, let's grab our router and get this thing routed out, and we'll clean it up with the chisel. So before we start routing, we're going to take and double side stick tape our piece to our bench. And my workbench is a little cluttered right now, so that's the reason I'm doing this. That way while we route, we don't have to worry about the piece shifting on us. Double stick tape is a must-have in every shop. Just put a little pressure on it, and that ain't going nowhere. So we're going to get our mortise routed out in 2 passes. We want to keep a 1/16 inch back off of each line that we made. That way we can get our chisel in there to get a tight fit. And we're going to just take our chisel and clean up our mortise. And you could do this with a drill press and a Forstner bit if you don't have a router, or you can just do it by hand. We're just going to work our way right into our knife line. And I've got my 1/4 inch chisel here to get right up in these corners. And you should be able to feel right when your chisel falls into that knife line. And it should fit just like this. Now for our slight taper, I'm going to take my carpenter square, and I want my taper to be about a 1/2 inch off of my base, starting about right here. And I just want a slight taper. I don't want too much. So we'll go ahead and scribe this line, pop this out of here, and just finish scribing this line. Alright, so I was going to have it do a little kickback right here, but I changed my mind. We're on the fly. We're doing it custom. I think I like the modern look of a straight line, just at a slight taper. So let's get our taper jig for the table saw set up, and we'll get this cut down. Well, our tapering jig was destroyed in my flood that happened back in December, and I never built a new one, and I don't have the material on hand to do it now. So we're going to add a couple of pieces of double-sided stick tape, and this is the heavy duty stuff, so I feel safe doing this on the table saw. And we'll take it in a couple passes, that way I don't try to get the cut all in one pass and risk having a malfunction with my tapering jig that I'm setting up on the fly. So I'm just going to take my straight edge, and here's my mark that I need cut. So we'll line our straight edge right up with that line we made for our taper, and just press this on nice and firm. So now we'll take and line up our straight edge right up against that blade, and we'll take this cut in 3 passes. Dang it. Yeah, this double-sided stick tape does not play around. Oh my God. Oh, there we go. Now for the fun part. I'm going to pull in 1 inch from both sides, and we'll take our square and just square it over to our edge over here, and just make a mark on our very edge so we'll be able to reference with our table saw when we go to make this alcove. And I'm going to mark both edges on both sides of my base. And then I'm going to pull 2 inches from my notch, and that will be where our alcove stops on either side of our riser. And again, we'll transfer those marks to the edge of our base. And I'm going to swap my 10-inch blade for one of my dado stack blades. And my dado stack blade is 8 inches. And that will allow me to get a deeper cut for the alcove without having too much width. And that'll make sense here in a second. Now, to set up our jig, I need to find the apex of my saw, which is lined up right about here. It's about perfect. And then measure from the piece of the jig to the edge of your table saw, and make sure you have the same number. And make a light pencil mark, it doesn't have to be a crazy pencil mark, right on your table saw base. That way we can reference this mark when we go to double side stick tape it. And then just take and line up your jig with that mark you made on your table saw, and then put some pressure down where that tape is. Now we'll come to the opposite side and do the same thing. Now what we're going to do is take our square and butt it right into the carbide tip of our blade and make a mark right on our jig here. And we'll do the same thing on this opposite side. And then we'll mark this side of the carbide tip. Now, we'll go ahead and line up the inside of our cove mark with this side of our carbide tip because that's where we're going to be stopping. What I'm going to do here is set a stop block right here on my table deck. And then we'll take and line up this side of our alcove with this side of the blade. And I'll put a stop block right here. That way I mitigate the risk of kickback and accidents. Now you want to drop your blade all the way down. We're going to set our piece in. We're going to start the blade and we're going to raise that blade slowly while holding it down. And once we hear it break the surface, we'll start pushing to our stop block. Once the blade stops, check your progress. And that is looking really good. So I like where it's at. So let's go ahead and rock and roll this alcove. Raise the blade just a quarter of a turn each time. Take this nice and slow. And if you're not comfortable doing it, don't do it. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get my other side done and I'll meet you back here at the table saw. All right, gang, so I've got everything sanded down to 150 grit. Now I just need to find a layout for my rods. These are 3/16 solid brass. And I think I'm gonna put the upper rod, keep it at its length, which is 12 inches. I'm going to set it about 1 inch down from the top and 3/4 inches in from the front. And I'll drill a hole all the way through for that one. I'll go in between the top of my base to that 1 inch mark I made and center the next one in between there. And I'll make this rod 10 inches. And for the bottom, what I'm thinking is doing a rod facing this way at 6 inches and then a second rod facing the opposite way at 6 inches for rings and stuff like that. So meet me at the drill press. So over here at the miter saw, we're going to just take this rod and cut it directly in half. I'm using this backer right here to hold it up against the fence to keep it firm while I cut it. Just knock those rods in place and use some epoxy. Once those are in place, just add a dab of CA glue. And we're going to add a dab of glue to the bottom of our piece here. And just hit it with a little bit of activator. And just take and hold it in place for 15 seconds or so until it cures. Once this dries up, we'll meet back here and slap some finish on it. And this bad boy will be complete. On this one, I'm just going to use a simple spray shellac. We'll let this dry up and I'll meet you back at the workbench. Rock stars, man, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I had an absolute blast making this. I'm going to give a quick shout out at the end of the video to one of my members who might shock you. But first, let's take a look at their jewelry stand. They're asking $100 for this thing. That, my friends, is well worth the build and the time it takes to put this thing together with a big ass profit. As far as material costs, you're looking at about $8 to $10 for material. The copper rods were a couple bucks off of Amazon. I'll link them in the description. I've got shipping calculated at $8 to $12 depending on where you ship it. And use pirateship.com. They will find you the best rates and they will only charge you one time per ship. This is definitely on my to-do list this summer because I plan on making a shit ton more of these badass jewelry stands. I can't wait to see what y'all's spin may be. Let me know in the comments if you want to make this a challenge. Before we go, I want to give a special, very special shout out to one of my members, Julian Powell, aka Jules. He suffers with primary progressive multiple sclerosis, which is a form of MS that hits you in your 40s and will have you wheelchair bound within 6 months. Unfortunately, he is wheelchair bound, but that doesn't stop him. This man is determined. This man has grit. This man is incredible and gives me so much inspiration and makes me so thankful, honored to have you as one of my top members, Jules. He recently sent me a picture of a pair of trousers he was wearing when he dropped his circular saw. Yikes, that's close. Thank God, Jules. You still got your jewels. But all kidding aside, I just wanted to share this guy's story with y'all because although he is wheelchair bound, he found his why for living, which can defeat anyhow. This is Bearded Viking Woodworks, and I have been Daniel. Get in your shop and make some sawdust. Thanks, guys.